It's the first Monday of the month, the first Monday of the year, and we're starting off on the wrong foot by hanging out online instead of in person doing things with human beings.
I
Um,
did that last night.
what's that?
I did that last night.
Right, right. Most of us did enough of it, right? Uh, um, so since it's the first meeting of the year, I thought we could talk about what we might want to accomplish this year. Like I have people I can reach out to. I know, I just haven't done it yet. And I had a couple other thoughts that I put out as primordial ideas on the email list. Um, and um, yeah, yeah. So I thought we'd start with that. But Adam, you had asked about unusual, and I want to get to this. You had asked about people who used the computers in, unusual ways or something.
Sure.
Can
Yeah.
you recap that question that you had?
Okay. Sure. Well, happy 2024, everybody.
Oh yeah, right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. A
Happy New Year.
couple. Yeah. Happy New Year. Day before yesterday, my friend Brian and Ryan came over. We were hanging out for about 8 hours or something like that. Sort of. Brian was coming over, and at the last minute, I invited Ryan over. So we came over, got together, and after Brian left, Ryan and I were discussing possible topics for a podcast that he would like to do. And one of the ideas I had come up with, because he wasn't sure what he wants to cover, I thought maybe the 26th would be a good idea, but he doesn't think there's enough material there. But I thought there could be if we reached out to people who had strange stories, well, not strange particularly, just unusual stories about how they used their Timex and Sinclair computers, maybe for a long time or in an unusual manner. And I mentioned this to the group, like people who might have upgraded a Timex 1000 to like 64K and had disk drives and a printer and maybe used it in their business. And Ryan was saying that in the 1980s, he would install computers in like the late 80s and replace them with PCs. But some of those computers he replaced were, I guess, not unusual either, but were used in ways that you wouldn't have expected, such as a Commodore 64 used um, or something like that. So I thought that was a neat idea, and maybe Ryan can follow that up a little bit about what we talked about, or we could just go from there.
What do you think, Ryan?
I turned off my video game for
Yeah, well, that was in the early '90s that I
Oh,
did some
okay.
of that, and the yeah, there was I think there were just a couple where there was some old home computer that was doing a little usually small tasks, and they were getting to the point where it was getting beyond the capability of whatever they had knocked up for those systems to do. But yeah, I was just curious as to whether what could we talk about, that isn't being served by a sort of Spectrum podcast, or perhaps by what Randy's doing with the
Floppy days.
his with Floppy Days, and he's going through all the computers from 1982, which was the year of like tons and tons of little computers.
Well,
And
and to add a little bit to this conversation, I'm afraid a lot of it's kind of lost to time, right? Because I'm sure there were quite a few, novel uses for these computers that we're talking about. I mean, the Timex in particular, but of course, the trash 80s, a TRS 80. Sorry, guys. The Commodores. I'm sure all these home computers were probably put to some, probably novel business use, right, for some of these smaller business owners at the time. But the reason I say I think they're lost to time is because we're a very small audience here, and obviously we weren't entrepreneurs, or we didn't own a business, and we did. Okay. And then, so, you know, I mean, I'm sure that all these computers were used to some degree in some of that capability, right? Where they were maybe used as a point of sale, you know, system, or inventory tracking, or, you know, something of that sort. Because I mean, computers at that time, right, were the holy grail of things like that, instead of, you know, where everything was kind of done, you know, piecemeal and with paper and pen, right? Or you know, if you're a bigger company, obviously you probably would have had a mini computer or something like that you could have done stuff like this on. But I think for the smaller guys that were, you know, had a home, not a home business at that time, but, you know, had a small retail business or maybe a couple of outlets, they probably were using some of these home computers for doing things like that. So, I mean, I think it would be good to discuss it in a general sense, but I don't know that we'll find too many people that actually use those machines, you know, that would come and talk about it. I mean, I think we've had a couple, right, David?
Yep.
But you know, they're, you know, again, I think it's just a very small audience that would even remember doing, you know, having those machines and using it for that particular thing. But I'm sure they did. You know, I don't doubt it, because, you know, the PC wasn't really that prevalent back then, and even then, when it was, it still wasn't exactly cheap, right? I mean, I remember building clones back in the, you know, earlyish mid 80s, and, you know, they were certainly cheaper than the IBM stuff was, but you know, significantly so. But still, it was, you know, 15, you know, $1,500 to get a pretty decent clone system going, right? That was, you know, probably comparable to a $3,000-4,000 IBM PC, right?
Yeah. So let me. How many folks are familiar with a show called How It's Made? It shows up
Yeah.
on Sci-Fi, or no? But it's on one of the cable channels.
I've seen it,
And
but is it still made? I haven't seen it in years.
I don't know if it's still being made, but I feel like it was mostly shot in maybe the late 90s and the early 2000s. So anyway, there's an episode of How It's Made about making piano rolls. Talk about old technology, right? And the last company in the United States to make piano rolls was a company called QRS, and it was located here in Buffalo. And they shot this episode at QRS, or you know, the scene, whatever. And at the time they shot it, they were still using an Apple II to control the machines that would make the holes, you know, in the piano roll paper. But that's digression. There is a guy, his name is Alger Salt, and he and another guy named Ray Mills developed this thing that they called a VOTEM. And the name came from the fact that it could measure voltage and temperature. And for the electronic nerds out there, the way that this thing worked was it used, I forgot the name of the exact chip, but it used this chip that would turn voltage into frequency. And so you would put in a DC, you know, had a little port for putting in a DC voltage, and then it would turn that into a frequency. And so it plugged into the cassette jack of the ZX80 or the ZX81 or the 2068 actually. And then you know, would have this little program that would run on your computer and measure the input frequency, you know, and turn that back into a number that represented the voltage. And I guess this thing, you know, was kind of popular with, you know, a certain set. He said they sold a few hundred. Alger told me that they sold one to a college engineering group that used it in a project that went on one of the space shuttles, and I've not been able to chase that detail down just yet. But it was something about manufacturing hollow spheres in zero gravity. And then there was another company.
Okay, you found a really cool use already. There you go.
Well, no, so here's the part where it kind of goes off the rails in terms of craziness, right? There was a company in Salt Lake City called Medi Products and they were a medical instrument company. And they designed a system to, quote, reclean and re-sterilize artificial kidneys around the 1000, the VOTEM, and some other hardware.
I got one for you.
Yeah.
About 1996, somebody reached out through CompuServe, and Frank and I made a all-night drive to Maryland on the east side of the big inlet, and we picked up a re-inventory of QLs from a company that was using them in their manufacturing business. And I
Really?
guess that was our office network.
Oh, wow. That's really crazy.
We had 2
Hey,
or 3
David,
years worth of sales out of just that one pickup. They had
Wow.
finally decided to go to the PC world. But they were networking as well as all the office work with their QLs.
Well, that was a pretty specialized workforce there because, you know, the QL is not your standard PC, right? So you kind of have to have a knack of how all that works with the QL. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
And one thing I would offer in general, anybody that probably remembers what was done in, you know, in a business environment is probably retired now.
Mhm.
Agreed,
Mhm.
which is the perfect time to talk to them.
Yes.
If you
Right.
can find them.
Yeah, I
Plenty of
know.
time on their hands.
Yeah.
And if they remember.
So a while back, I was doing some online looking for Sinclair stuff, and I ran across a reference to this article. It's from the Journal of Automatic Chemistry, and the title of the article is "A Potentiometric Analyzer Based on the ZX81 Microcomputer." It's from October, December of '83. So essentially, someone decided that why go out and spend a bunch of money on, you know, if you got a small lab, and why spend thousands of dollars when you have a small budget? Just you pick up a ZX81, which that time was relatively cheap, and then do the hook up hardware to it and do what you need to do to get your work done if you have a very limited budget. So
Yeah, there were a few things like that, Tim. I remember coming across some other, you know, oddball papers where folks used the Sinclair
the
instead of the
article actually
PDP-8.
has some hardware diagram on how to basically hook up the whatever hardware you need to. It's like a digital audio converter. I see a DAC, so it must be digital audio converter. So
Okay.
Nuts and Bolts used to have a lot of real world application articles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they still do. It's a little more Arduino and
Newer.
yeah.
Well, you kind of, you know, like I said, I think you have to kind of think of the Timex, especially the 1000, being, you know, $50, kind of as the Arduino, you know, of the day. Because here you have a full computer with basic, right? All you got to do is get an I/O board so you can cook it up to stuff on the outside and interact with it. And hey, man, you got a, you know, a modern day Arduino.
And since Paul mentioned the QL, I think it was probably the most expensive QL program sold was from that EMSoft did. It was a CNC milling program. But you had and you bought the software. It came with this QL too. And it was for a specific CNC. It was like $1,000. Peter Hill sold. I don't know how many they ever sold, but it was listed in the EMSoft catalog. Very specific for doing CNC machine work with a QL.
Wow, that's crazy.
Well,
then,
I do know a guy that did that with a 2068, of course. Not for $1,000, but yeah, I don't know how much that machine cost him, but certainly I'm sure wasn't $1,000.
I'm gonna show my screen. Do you guys see
Yeah,
my
I see it.
Okay. I spotlight for there we go. I'm just looking for the spotlight. Okay, so another oddball use was this company called Parker Electronics designed an HVAC controller for carrier. And it used a 1500 stacked on top of some other piece of hardware underneath it. And they even got printers that they relabeled as their own. So I've not been able to find.
When you say carrier, are you talking about the heating air conditioning units?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's unusual. I guess these are just everywhere.
They're just everywhere. Yeah. And I've not been able to find a contact at Parker, or because Parker's still around. I just haven't been able to
They're
get.
probably in Albuquerque now.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting because I think we had talked about that particular application before in a meeting or two, but that they may have actually had a custom ROM, right? Because they,
That's my thinking.
yeah, it wouldn't boot up into just the K cursor, right? I mean, that's kind of useless.
And what do you do? Just like hang a little 13-inch TV off to the side here, whatever.
Right. So they might have they may have come up with their own, OS, right? That it boots up into and it starts doing whatever it needs to do. So
Yeah.
Well, to give you an idea, when Motorola came out with their 6800 evaluation kit,
yeah,
it was like a year and a half, and Bailey was making digital pinball machines using microprocessor, using the 6800.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
It didn't take long for them to transition from electromechanical to electronic.
So would that have been in like 77 or?
My pinball machines was 78.
Okay.
And I think I got the D2 kit in 76.
Yeah, the 6800 came out a few years earlier than that.
And they were in production in I think 77 with the electronic pinball machines.
Yeah. I used to work in that industry, right? When I was a kid in high school, I did arcade. I worked in arcade. So yeah, you get to see some of the older pinballs, and you're right. You can kind of tell the transition when they went to digital displays instead of the electromechanical wheel displays, that the numbers would roll around. But then they started going to the neon type, the high voltage discharge displays.
That's right.
And so those had to have been controlled by, some kind of computer, and mostly it was those. I was a big Williams fan, so I knew a lot about the Williams pinball machines. But yeah, they used, I think 6502s, or, I don't think I've seen too many like Z81s, but I think they were mostly, the 65XX series CPUs that they were using in those. I mean, they were custom boards, right? They weren't anything off the shelf, but they used those Motorola procs.
Speaking terms with Larry Kenny, he was using his 2068 as a controller for his three-dimensional wood cutting lathes. But he wasn't programming in Sinclair Basic. He was using High-Soft Pascal. And one of the reasons why he used that is he said that the code that was produced in High-Soft Pascal was ROMable. And the only reason why he switched to Turbo Pascal and eventually to Delphi is because the Z80 chip could not keep up with the speed of the lathe. But for me, it was the TS1000 that kind of saved my life as far as being employed, because I have balance and dexterity problems, and most of the jobs that were available to people my age were either very mechanical or required typing skills, and I could barely make 25 words a minute. And most of these people were demanding 60 to 100 words a minute. I just couldn't do it. But once I got into the TS1000 and TS2068, I found I had a knack for computer software. So I picked up on word processing as spreadsheets and databases very, very quickly. And if it wasn't for that, I would never have been employed. I would have been out in the street.
David, you've told me, and I think you've talked to us before about Iris 10 holder using a Sinclair computer to run her business.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. There was you've told us before about Iris Tenholder using a Sinclair to run her business.
Oh, yeah, she used well, she was using a TS-1000 and then switched to a TS-2068 to run her business, and her business was a restaurant, and she used to use it to keep control of her liquor stock, and also her employees, the hours they put in and how much they earned and this type of thing.
Do you have any idea what programs she used to do that with?
Well, she did it with BASIC, and we were at one time working on Pascal programs to do the same thing.
Oh, so
Okay.
custom software.
Pascal seemed to be better at handling money than Sinclair BASIC, and also ran a heck of a lot faster.
Right, it's true.
But I can tell you a funny story about that, though. Iris and I took a Pascal course together at Algonquin College, and one day Iris was late coming to class, and teacher asked, "Well, where is Iris?" And I said, "Well, she was delayed. She was delayed because she was working all night on one of her programs." And he said, "Oh, what kind of problem was she having?" And she, how did it go? Her husband came late at night and asked her what was she doing up to so late, and she said, "Well, I'm working on my Pascal program, but I'm having trouble passing my parameters." And her husband Will said, "Well, take some exercise and come to bed. You'll pass them okay in the morning."
Oh dear Lord, yes. So you know,
Hi,
I have.
David.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, hello. This is Gustavo. Happy New Year for all the group.
Yes.
When you ask regarding if the Pascal code is roamable, I remember that the HighSoft software uses some variables on RAM in the middle of the program. I don't know. I'm not be sure if the runtime could be assumed that you can roamable the output code. Do you have any experience with that, or?
Turning the compiled Pascal into a ROMable, into a ROM, no. I'm not a hardware person at all.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
that
the next question is, do you know if it exists the Pascal, no, sorry, the HighSoft version for C compiler for Timex?
Yes, there is a HighSoft C compiler, but I think it's for the Spectrum only.
No, I try to see if exists the Timex version of that.
No, I don't think there's a Timex Sinclair version of it. I think the only version of it is for the ZX Spectrum.
Because my question is, I don't know if in Portugal was released this for the Timex computer.
a C compiler?
Yeah.
I don't.
But I don't know if the C compiler, maybe it's the HighSoft tools. I don't know that was released under CPM or releases under Timex Basic.
There's a thing called Dev Tools, which they made. HighSoft
Maybe,
made
maybe.
a 2068 version of that.
Yes, maybe it's correct.
Okay.
I never have one this because it's just only hear about that.
No, DevTools and Monitor are both ZX Spectrum programs. If you don't have the emulator, you can't run them.
Yeah, but the problem with the version of the Spectrum is because the code is running under the variables in Timex. You need to get a special version compiled more in high memory. That is the problem, because the Spectrum has more room space in the working area. Okay, thank you.
So I was gonna say I have names of people, and I've tracked down some folks. I can bring more former Timex people, but they're not going to be, you know, they're not going to be the Dannies or the, you know, the programmers or whatever. They're going to be, you know, the sort of more adjacent folks like Sue Mahoney. If any of you remember, Sue Mahoney was the person who helped start the Timex
The Boston group.
of the Boston group. Thank you, Tim. And then got hired by Timex. And one of the things that she worked on was helping produce the manuals. So like when the 1500 manual was done, she was somehow sort of in charge of that production. And when it came out, she sent out an individual copy to everybody on the team. And that was one of the things in Lon's sort of time capsule that he sent, was his 1500, and inside was this little memo from Sue Mahoney. I think it'd be interesting to talk to Sue. There was another person, Marty Warner, who, when Timex closed, she went to work at Games to Learn By, which was run by her husband and her father, I think. And from what one of the former vendors, you know, programmers, told me, she was somehow involved in licensing along with George, and she helped this guy, you know, recover his program that had never gotten it. He'd submitted it, they agreed to purchase it, and then, you know, Timex should have closed up, so it never got released. And it was I think it was like an accounting package or something.
Oh, wait, so let me clear something up from understand what you mean by that.
Yep.
So like people would sign paperwork to get their program, or they were sold to Timex, and then it got sort of stuck in this limbo area.
Yeah.
Where they couldn't use it and sell it, and it couldn't be sold by Timex because they were out of business.
Yeah.
Oh, that's unusual.
And the guy's name was Jim. I can't remember his last name, but he had a company called Phoenix Enterprises, and he misspelled Phoenix. It was PHEO or something.
Or maybe he spelled it with an F.
I'm sorry.
Or maybe he spelled it with an F.
No. He he reversed the two letters. And he, you know, when we talked, he, you know, he commented on how people would ask him all the time about why did he know that he had misspelled his company's name?
There was probably a reason for that, right?
He didn't know how to spell it.
Oh.
Well, back in '82, the Arizona JCs issued some trading pins.
Yeah.
And it spelled both ways.
Oh, really?
So he might have been a JC and taken it off of that.
Well, he was out of the East Coast. He's like in Nashville now.
Well, the trading pins were done at national conventions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Jim Payne. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. So anyway, Jim had licensed some kind of program to Timex, and when Timex closed up shop, Marty helped him get it back and helped other folks get their programs back, is what he said. And John, who's not here, I don't see John's name. Yeah. John on the email list had recently recovered this program called The Crown, and that was a program that was put out by Games to Learn By. Might have been something that was submitted to Timex, but we won't know. You know, we won't know until we can either find the person, you know, who wrote the program, or talk to Marty and maybe she'll remember. But anyway, I know lots of people like that. I would love to get Alger on to talk about his VOTEM and, you know, his other craziness. And there's other, you know, people like Carl, you know, Carl and John, you know, with their business. So yeah, I can work on bringing those kinds of folks if you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think your idea, or maybe a misunderstanding, but it seems like you think they wouldn't be important to have us, or we wouldn't appreciate them as much. But I think those are kind of little jewels that are going to just slip right through the cracks if we don't get them now, you know?
Right, and that's my thinking too. You know, I figure they have some kind of interesting story to tell, so it'd be, you know, hopefully they can remember something.
Especially like, wasn't the Boston User Society one of the largest in the United States back in the
Yes.
1980s? Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge. It was huge because they had all the, you know, all the computers, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I see that Mark has a question for you. He's talking about, he was wondering about how many user groups there were total probably in the United States for Timex, I suppose. Am I got that right, Mark?
Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, we all know about all the different. Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, we can hear you.
Good.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about, you know, all the different newsletters and, you know, there's a million of them, it seems, out there. How big was the readership?
Or like user group newsletters?
Yeah, so I was just wondering how big was the total Timex population?
Well, I'll tell you this.
Almost all 50 states were represented.
Yeah, yeah. When I, you know, index magazines and newsletters and whatever, anytime I see a name, I go and plug it into, you know, into the website. And there are nearly 3,000 individuals listed there. So if you go to, you know, the website, you go to community and people, there'll be almost 3,000 folks listed. I was doing some indexing of some issues that I had recently come across, and even within those, I came across some new names. And then for how many user groups? Let me just see real quick here what the number of user groups I have. And obviously, I don't have all
states that had multiples.
I don't have all of them, but there's 158 user groups that I've managed to document so far.
If you think of all those names, there's probably be many people that are memberships but aren't mentioned in the newsletters. So
exactly, right. And you know, there's a fraction. Yep. Yeah. Like the Westinghouse group, one of the guys in that sent me a membership list, and it was like 2 or 3 pages long of, you know, just names in the Westinghouse area.
And I know, you know, and when I started the Timex user group here,
yeah,
you know, I was getting people, you know, that I think it was like a religious nunnery maybe, because I think it was a lady that she was from a religious group that, you know, I guess they were using the 1000s for some stuff, but they couldn't ever come to the meetings, but they would correspond with me.
Huh.
And so, I mean, you're going to have people like that, I think, in some of these bigger groups, or not even, you know, I'm not considering ourselves group big, you know, but for New Mexico, I think we were probably it. So we would have people from, you know, New Mexico is a pretty good sized state, you know, geographically wise, right, as opposed to Rhode Island or something like that.
I think there was also one in Las Cruces, Carl.
Okay, that could be, but I think they were close, and I remember them sending me tapes of stuff. I think I still have them, and some of the letters that they sent for maybe trying to get help with some programs, right? Because we had, you know, more people we could disseminate it to at the meetings and maybe talk about it. But I mean, I even remember putting in, I think maybe some of the magazines had like user group listings, right? That you would
Sure
send
did,
in, you would send in your user group and they would post it, they would list it up. So there might be, that may be another place to look. You probably already looked through that, David, I would imagine, but,
Oh yeah, I've done that.
but I know I've sent it to a couple of those and I remember getting published, in there and I was like, oh, cool. Our user group is represented, in a magazine, right? So that was kind of cool. So then I think that's how other people eventually found us, was through things like that, right? Because how else are you going to get, advertisement, so to speak, for your user group? Would have to be through, like a publication or something like that that had a list. So
I know in the 90s, Seacoast Services, other words, Bob Dill, published the QL Survivors notebook or something, and he listed in the early 90s a bunch of user groups. So, and also vendors and so on. So of course that was not the peak at all in the 90s.
Uh,
I don't know if David has
CompuServe
a
was
copy of
over
that.
2,000 people.
What was that? Could you repeat that? I didn't hear you.
In CompuServe, which you had to pay for every month,
Mhm.
there was over, the last numbers I remember is about 2,400.
Oh, folks
Time-
on CompuServe.
Timex people, right? I'm
Yes.
assuming. Yeah.
And that means they were telecommunicating.
Right.
That brings us to another topic if we want to switch topics here because I do want to talk about that, maybe not today, but I want to somehow, once I get my stupid internet going, if you call a 300 baud modem internet, I would like to try to get my 2068 onto a bulletin board or something like that. But first I'd have to get a serial card or something. So how does one go about doing that?
Well, if you want to use the existing terminal emulation software like Spectrum 64, I think, you would need to use a converted 2050 modem, because that's what most of those things are written for. Those things are written for a Intel 8251 chip sitting at ports 73 and 77 off the top of my head.
Well, I mean, if you just want to get onto BBSs, I know David's got a couple of 2050 modems he's selling, right?
Yeah.
One's like in great or not so bad shape, and another one I think is kind of, what do you call it, Dave? Ugly?
Ugly.
It's
yes.
ugly. Yeah. But anyway, so, you might want to look at getting a 2050 modem.
That would be the first
Right.
step, is getting a 2050 modem. Like there's no newer, I thought there'd be like a new way to do this. Is that not possible?
No.
Oh,
No.
I'm kind of surprised.
There's also still many available from the Bill Miller collection. I think a few still have the adapter. I can go look.
All right, yeah, I'll pick one of those up from whoever has one then. But we don't need to take care of that here. We'll figure it out in the group or whatever. But I was just curious. I thought there was absolutely going to be like some new serial way that I just hadn't found.
Well, I mean, sure, there's, you could probably get like a US Robotics 56K modem, right? But I mean, it's the software.
Right.
Yeah. So at least with the 2050, that came with software for either the 1000 or the 2068. So I mean, you have both bases covered there. But like David's mentioning, yeah, you'd have to. I mean, if you got a 2050, you could convert it to a serial port, right?
Yeah,
and then you could hook it up to one of these. Yeah, you could hook it up to one of these other things, and I think you can still maintain the 2050 as a modem. You can maybe just make it switchable where the serial portion of it goes, right? Does it go to the internal, modem part of the 2050, or do you want to go to an external RS-232 port, right? And that you could put on there, but
and the 2050, it does pulse dialing then?
I believe it does. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think it does just touchtone.
No,
it's
pulse.
it's got a read relay in there.
Yeah, but Adam, to your point, basically it needs, someone is going to need to make a 2050 like device that uses an 8251 on those two ports that also has an RS-232 jack on it. I think that's the easier path than trying to convert a 2050. I mean, just given the amount of time it takes to spin up a PCB, or how quickly you can spin up a PCB these days, it wouldn't take very long to make
The
a
FDD,
circuit. Go ahead,
the,
Gustavo.
yes, yes. The FDD3 system has a Western Digital chip, is a dual serial port compatible with the 8251, and also include the baud rate generator on chip.
Mm-hmm.
It's a single chip, 2 ports, full handshaking lines.
Which chip is that?
Is 2123, WD 2123. It's like FDD3 has inside.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
and you could also use a Raspberry Pi Pico to do the same thing.
Of course. And that would be the simplest path, wouldn't it?
Well, and you know, that could give you RS-232, and with a little bit of work, not much, you could also output the tones for 300 and 1200 baud modems as well.
Oh.
It's just frequency. It's just frequency shift keying.
Yeah, and Jeff, couldn't we just have it talk out the USB port? Talk serial out the USB port?
You could, but that implies that you're going to a PC or something.
Yeah.
Yes, exists. It's the FTD.
Isn't there a programming port or something? Diagnostic?
Well, it can be used for either.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump ahead of ourselves here, like, I think, and unless I have real phone line, I have to use voice over IP, which is notorious for not working with modems at all,
Right.
and 300 baud at best, I think. So
I
is that right?
suspect the packet format of IP is what destroys the modem capability.
The problem with them both the voice over IP, you need to get a codec to pass the analog part for the signal to the bytes. You need to apply a codec, and the codec is a high consumption of CPU. That's why maybe a DSP processor or any processor inside the box, the modem box, convert this and then transmit the bytes directly to the endpoint. It's simple, but you need a codec. That is the key point for this.
Adam, would you work with a telnet, direct IP connection instead of a modem?
I wouldn't care. I mean, I just thought that would be the easiest way to do it, because I thought that the software and the hardware would just be obtainable.
Well, I mean, we can try with a 2050
I mean, I'm not
modem.
trying to do anything special here. In the end, what would I be connecting to? I'd be connecting to, at best, a BBS, which I've done, and I can do quite easily.
Yeah.
There's some that you can connect to through the internet, but I just thought it'd be cool to do on the 2068 directly on real hardware.
Yeah.
On my old days, I have a TNC. The TNC is a radio packet modem. This is a special box, and also I connect the Timex 2068 and use a radio equipment to transmit and receive programs worldwide using a modem.
Listen,
a radio modem. Yeah.
Mark?
I was just typing that.
Yeah, I see that actually.
That just blew my mind. I'm like, wow, great minds.
Yeah, the TNC stuff is old.
And it's too bad, Adam, that you can't live vicariously through me, because I got onto all kinds of BBSs on my 2050 modem with the 2068 back in the day.
Well, okay.
Not just well, there weren't too many Timex ones. You're here locally in Albuquerque.
Sure.
Right, but there was Apple ones or Commodore ones that were here in Albuquerque.
Yeah,
that
I
you
used to
could log
connect to
into.
modems or BBSs using my modem in the 90s.
We had one here. We had one here that got into Usenet before it was on. Before it was on the www.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Adam, maybe you should get your ham license.
Come on.
Yes.
There's a no code requirement now.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. Maybe that should be our 2024 resolution, is to get ham licenses.
Look at you. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
My friend.
When I do hear the name Adam, I do think ham.
Yeah,
Why is that?
because you're a ham.
Oh, probably so. Oh, I get.
Yeah.
My
Adam and ham
gosh,
go well
you
together.
guys are gonna be here all week.
They'll be here all year.
Right.
Well,
And then
I
we
had a
could-
ticket back in the
And then we
70s.
could have a meeting over ham radio.
Well, and we can do packet over ham.
Right.
You know, we can.
exactly.
I forget what what is the the transport for digital over ham called?
Oh, there's like 3 or 4 different
Okay,
ones
but
right
humor
now.
me, because the last time I read an ARRL handbook was in the 80s.
Wow. Yeah,
so-
there's like 5 or 6 different protocols right now.
Okay. Okay.
So you have
It's time to go look
packet,
through all-
you have slow scan TV.
Yes, I think it's
Um,
packet that I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Actually, we talked about
this-
slow scan, Adam. Remember
Yeah.
that guy in Fort Worth wrote that
The
program
pictures, you
that
mean?
is on Ryan's cassette
Oh, really? For what? For slow scan TV?
for generating an image for slow scan, I think.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
Wow.
Right. That's
Yeah.
how the pictures were sent back from space, right? Back in the 70s or something like that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's how maybe the Voyager did it, maybe something like that. Don't quote
know.
me. Don't quote me.
Okay. I want to derail us for just 1 second, because a long time ago, Joao Ramos from the Load ZX Museum, he gave us a little tour of the museum and he showed us a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that sort of flashed by really quickly was this silver box. And both Carl and I picked up on this and we're like, what is that? And Andy, I don't know how you found that, because I've been asking for this picture for a little bit now. And so this let me set this up a little bit. Timex decided that they were going to make an improved version of the 1000 called a 1500, and it was going to have 16K of RAM built in. Solves the RAM pack wobble problem. And you know, who knows what else other features were part of the original design set. But what ended up happening was folks in Portugal said, well, you know, we've got these Spectrum cases, and you know, we've got this you know, rubber key. Why not make some other improvements at the same time? And so what ended up happening was the 1500 that we got, right, with the special rubber matte keyboard and the nice little case and etc. And so it was you know, sort of the brainchild of both Timex Middlebury and Timex Portugal. But one of the things, so that the silver thing that grabbed both Carl and I's attention was this thing sitting in Joao's background. And this is Timex Middlebury's original concept of what the 1500 would be.
Wow.
This
How
is-
cool is that?
Isn't that crazy?
Now, does that also have a flat keyboard, or are those?
Yeah,
buttons
it's
supposed raised?
just a 1000. The idea was that the circuit board itself would be extended a little bit, and that the 16K worth of RAM would sit roughly under that first row, the 1 through 0 row.
Where did this picture come from?
This is from the Load ZX Museum. It says it came from Timex Computer World. So let me see if Johnny Red's still with us. Johnny Red, can you talk about this? Because it says it comes from Timex Computer World, which in theory is you.
Well, João already shown this in Timex Connection.
I'm sorry?
João already showed this machine in Timex Connection. It's
Okay.
really only a TS1000.
Oh, inside it's only 1000. It's not even the
No,
theoretically improved circuit board, huh?
no, it's just a normal 1000.
So all they did was spray paint it silver.
Yes, we were expecting it to have a 16K RAM, but it's only a 2K RAM.
That's awesome.
It's silver. Change the color.
Yeah. Well,
That's funny too, because I'm getting ready to paint. I've just masked off some of the stuff from one of the 1000s I got from Ryan, but I'm getting ready to paint it, so it'll be like that. It'll be silver.
That would be
So-
very cool.
So, Carl, apparently all you have to do is spray paint a 1000 to get you don't have to do any other upgrades.
That's
The
right.
prototype.
Gotta
That's
change the
right.
label.
Change the label.
Yeah, well, it does have the label, David, that you have some of those. So
Yep.
that'd be good to get one or two of those from you. But my main thing is the bottom is the whole case is black.
Yeah.
But the bottom, they've got the little labels, and they're kind of, I don't know how they did it. They kind of heat staked them in or something like, the letters are kind of, they're embossed in the plastic somehow, right? And then they silk screen the white, like for TV, for mic, for power, or I think it says actually 9 VDC, right?
Yep.
So I got to mask those off because I don't want to paint those. Besides, the bottom of the case should be gray, right? Just if you're going off of the 2068 kind of style, they're not, the whole 2068 isn't all silver. The bottom of it is actually
It's that weird
a
gray,
grayish. Yeah, it's a grayish color. So
my question is, Carl, you have a printer silver back in the picture of you.
I do. Yeah, that's one of my painted conversions.
It's original,
Timex,
no, because all are black. Normally, all
right.
the
They
printers are black.
never, as far as I know, they never made silver ones, but you saw them in advertisements. And actually on the back of I think the 2068 box, they show a silver version of the 2040. But as far as I know, you could never buy one like that. They're all black.
You can
And-
fill the heat stamp letters with wax. That'll protect them from your paint. Then
That's
you clean the wax
true.
out.
That's true. I didn't think of that. I
So
was just
some-
going to mask them off, and so they would still be black with the white lettering, and just that portion of it. I'm obviously going to paint the rest of the bottom black. I mean, gray or whatever the color is. But there's also the FCC label, right, and the stuff like that. I can't really. That isn't heat staked. I think that's just silk screened, printed onto the black.
Yeah.
So I'll just have to cover that. And so, I mean, it won't be, it'll be close enough. Nobody's going to really notice that kind of detail of it, I think, but I still think it would be cool to have a silver, 1000. That's basically a 1500. That's why I want the 1500 ROM, right? If somebody, I know we've kind of talked about that that way I can put the 1500 ROM in the 1000 board, and I'll obviously upgrade it to 16K, SRAM right on the board so that, obviously it'll have that.
So Andy's been doing some more digging. He found the webpage that this image is on, and he points out that the label on the silver 1000 is actually sort of the reverse of what ended up on the 1500.
Mhm.
And we've seen that. I have those in the drawer. We've talked about that in the past. Anyway.
Yeah.
So Carl, here's a for reference, 1500 and my ZX81.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, you see the gray bottom and the white print.
Right. And you see how they're heat staked? I don't know how they
Well,
they
if
put some
you look
kind
at my 81, they really appear to be printed, stamped on. It's not the plastic's not.
if you run your
it's
finger
not-
over it, I think you can feel there's like an embossment there where they made those letters, and then they
Well,
put the
maybe
writing inside.
maybe some models did this. I'm not seeing it on mine.
Because if you look at the bottom of the 1000, look at the FCC label.
No.
That is totally silkscreen. There is no embossment there. That is for sure. But I know when I looked at mine, you can feel, if you run your
No.
finger over those letters, you'll feel edges.
Yeah, I know. And on the 1500, I can see that just very little bit. And I don't.
The plastic
know
is
if I have
silver
another
or is
1000 there.
painted? The
The
plastic
plastic
is
on the
different?
1500 on the bottom is not painted. That must be what they molded it into, the color they molded it with. The top part of the 1500 is painted.
Yeah.
That's not,
Ah,
I
the
think
top.
it's just, yeah, the
Okay.
top half is painted silver and then the bottom half is a grayish
Oh,
color.
okay.
So Carl, I'm gonna blow your mind for a little bit. So Dave definitely knows this story, but my stepmother's brother worked at Timex, and that's how I got all the Timex gear when I was like 14. He just came and gave it to me for Easter, and he wanted me to do some programming stuff. At 14, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. But I'm pretty sure the printer I had was silver.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That would be interesting to see. Well, I guess you don't have it anymore,
Well,
right?
I haven't had it. I mean, I moved like 10 times after that. So
Yeah.
I was, I think I left Long Island when I was 16 and I went back to Connecticut and I was into some Timex stuff. And then, but after 89, I went into the military. Yeah. Totally long gone, unfortunately. But
That
I'm
would be
pretty sure
interesting.
in
Okay.
my mind, it looks like yours.
Right.
And I have a black printer right now, and it doesn't look like that. Like I'm distinctly thinking it was silver. So it came right from
Must have been maybe it was a prototype-ish one that they got.
yeah.
That,
Yep.
'cause
Yeah.
I know they wanted to sell them.
They got it all for free.
Right.
You know.
And I'm sure they wanted to sell the silver ones because they wanted them to go along with the new, the 1500 and the 2068, right? So,
Yep.
but they just never, it just never. And I wanted to do the silver one because, like I said, I'm kind of a sucker for all these things that Timex showed, but
Right.
we don't ever have any of them, right? And you learn a lot of stuff when you actually try to paint it. It's not as simple as, oh, I'll just paint it silver. Sure, I made the mistake of painting the whole thing silver. But then I kind of started looking at it and like, well, the bottom half of the case isn't supposed to be silver,
Right.
right?
So it
And
has
so
to have that other color. Yeah. That
right, right.
operational.
So I had to repaint the bottom of the one you see in the picture there, and then then you don't think about the connector that goes into the computer. That's a separate case, right? It does come apart. It has two halves. So you do the same thing with that. You paint the top half silver and you
Right.
paint the bottom half gray, right? And so the cable is black. Obviously, you're not going to paint that, but you just learn. You can see the buttons too on my printer. The two buttons are separate, right? They're not together. When you take it apart, they're separate buttons. So you got to you got to paint the buttons silver, and you don't want to put too much on there because you don't want it to bind right
Hey, Carl,
inside the.
after
Yeah.
you finish this thought, I want to bring us back to what David started out like an hour ago already, talking about what we're going to cover in the future
Right.
meetings.
Right. Yeah. True.
If you don't mind. But
True.
finish up your thought, please. That'd be cool.
Well, no, but
Keep
still,
enjoying
it's
it.
just all these silver things, right? That's kind of the thing I was, wanting to get. So the 2050 is already silver, but the 2040 modem, the 2020 cassette recorder, right, it's already silver, so you don't have to worry about that. But I'm just saying, if you wanted to paint one, it's not just, I guess you could paint it however you wanted to, right? It's really your printer. You can paint it the way you wanted to, but if you wanted it to be more, something I think that Timex would have officially had as a product, it is dual color to me. And just another thing too, because I know I don't want to get too many tangents here, but on the 2060 expansion unit, I'm working on all these damn 2068s, fixing them, right? So the runs I got from Ryan, they must have been in some mechanical, physical things because the standoffs for the back half of the board, they kind of break off. And maybe it's just now that these cases are getting 40 years old, they're getting more and more brittle as well. But they broke off, and I was looking at how the 2060 diagrams are and how the 2068 is made, where the base plate, the base mold, I think we could easily copy that and just make it a little wider because it has the lips and how it goes together with the top half. I think that would be a good I need to take some pictures or something like that and kind of expand it a few inches more because so it'll cover the at least maybe to get a base unit for the 2060 expansion, maybe kind of started as far as the 3D print is concerned. And then start working on the top half, because I think the the front edge of the 2068 has that bevel, and I think that would be a good starting point for the top of the case of the 2060, because it has that bevel as well, and it's got the cutout for the for where the Timex Sinclair label would go into. But anyway, I'm done.
Thank you, Carl.
So,
I
well,
appreciate it. No, I think it's a
you
neat
can't be
subject.
done though, because I have a question. How long did it take? How long did it take you?
To print that, I mean, to paint that, it probably, if I recall, it was about 2, maybe 3 days. And I didn't paint that as well as I wanted to, because the ones I kind of start now, I actually coat them with the clear coat thing. I didn't clear coat that one. So when you would handle it, you would start getting silver paint on your fingers, and it would start leaving fingerprints, right? So I was like, oh, something else you learned. You've got to clear coat the paint once you're done. So yeah.
And by the way, my Shapeways friend came back. He emailed me back and he said, Shapeways is almost out of money. He's not done a 3D print anything.
Oh, okay.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah, I've never used Shapeways. I've used some other companies, Sculptio and some of those other guys. But I think the main thing is coming up with either I'm going to have to do it myself and get into. Somebody was mentioning one of the software that they were using to make the case for your Pico.
Yep.
Right, because I was really, really fascinated by the fact that they got the Fox grill like the 2068 has on the top. They actually got that on that design. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't remember. Was that also a John? That might have been also John.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple of folks here in the group whose names I'm looking at right now that talk a good talk about 3D printing.
Well, I was just looking at the 2068 base, and because I had to super glue these standoffs back in there, and I was kind of seeing how they made the mold, and I was like, that's probably a good place to start if we're going to do like a base, the base of the 2060. Just basically copy what they did for the 2068 and just modify where we needed to make it, because it's got to have those side lips where the extensions come up so it can go into the top. When you put the top half on, it'll not mold in, but it'll match up into that to give its rigidity, so you couldn't push in on the sides. It gives it some strength there.
Yeah.
But might as well use something that's already existing instead of just coming up with something from scratch.
Well, I'm going to drag us back to David. With the 4 topics you brought up, David. You brought up more special guests, which we kind of covered. Programming challenges, maybe. Hardware projects. Physical newsletter, which would be Tim's deal. And the other kind of things I tossed out there were a Timex podcast, which we can talk about another time. I'd like to hear more from TS Pico users. Maybe some games, maybe applications, and we also, another subject we touched on is telecommunications. But maybe we can have upcoming, like in half an hour bit dedicated to each of those or something. I don't know exactly how it would work, but is that what we want to try to talk about a little bit today?
That's exactly. And I mean, Carl would like to recreate the 2060 case, but like a lot of things, I think that's going to have to be a team effort. That a couple other folks are going to have to jump in and help out there. So and I will tell you now that I think at my limit for organizing projects. For I am fully committed.
And kind of along with what Adam is saying, we may we may want to record these separate from these meetings. Right. And then make them as downloadable. You can watch them as you want, but they're, Timex Sinclair group productions, right? But they're these little 30-minute snippets of things we want to cover, but they're separate from this meeting. Obviously, they would just totally cover that, and you would be able to go and watch those, as you wanted to, if you were interested in that.
Well, Carl, are you aware that already exists? I mean, David does that already with his group.
So my group.
Well, sorry, is that not your group? I don't
No,
know.
it's not my group.
What, the
Don't try
Discord?
and shirk responsibility, Dave.
It's exactly right, Jeff. No, okay, so you know, I have this Zoom license, and I'm like, shit, might as well use it up. And so when Ricardo, you know, approached me last year or whatever about his project, and then I started, you know, suggesting, well, maybe you should talk to, you know, you should talk to Tim, and then you should, you know, you should get Jeff involved. At some point, it became, well, maybe we should be meeting, you know, maybe we should have a Zoom meeting. And so we ended up having Zoom meetings every Wednesday night. So there's a Zoom meeting in 2 nights. And
Right. Well, I joined your meeting along with Ryan this past Wednesday.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. You guys had,
By
you know,
accident.
you had a whole bunch of feedback, and you messaged me like about 20 minutes before the meeting, and I was like, well, you know, might as well have it from the horse's mouth.
Better than the other end.
Right, exactly. You know, and this is I've actually sort of been, you know, mulling this over a little bit, because, you know, we're not, you know, an official user group, although, you know, Tim is our treasurer. Um, but, you know, we kind of run a little bit like one. You know, if there's terrible coffee, it's your fault. But, you know, we could be a little more structured in these meetings, and we could say, you know, because you ask me this all the time, Adam, do we have, you know, what's the agenda coming up for the next thing? And you know, sometimes I found people, or sometimes people want to talk about stuff, and I would really like to encourage folks to think about that. Think about, you know, are you working on a project? Do you want to present your project? You know, do you want us to set aside 15, 20, 30 minutes where people don't interrupt you while you talk about your project? Not having been at a well-run in-person, you know, user group meeting in the past, I don't know, you know, what such a thing looks like. But, you know, we could be a little more structured. Certainly an option. And we could, you know, give folks time. I mean, I've always been open to that. You know, when somebody says, I want to talk about my thing, I'm like, yep, we'll make sure we get you, you know, get you called on. Ingo, you know that. And so, and then, you know, I've pushed, or I've asked Jeff a lot to talk about his projects. And Ryan, you know, we've asked you to show us, you know, the stuff that you're working on. But one of the things that happens often, and Adam, you know, you have reined us back in more than once, where we go off into this, you know, this wild rabbit chase of a you know,
Fun stuff.
the fun stuff, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. But, you know, but 45 minutes later, and it's like, we're out of time. Is and Mark's mentioned it in the chat, is, you know, special interest groups, right? And I think that's sort of what, when the Wednesday thing, you know, is in essence. We don't record those though. I could record them, and, you know, like I think Mark, you said make them, or Carl, you said make them available somewhere.
Yeah, if people were interested in it, they could watch it. If they're not,
Right.
then they don't worry about it.
Right. The last one was recorded for Ricardo, right?
Yes, because he wasn't there. Yes. So, you know, I mean, that could be a thing. We could, you know, for folks who want to, you know, work on projects and talk with other people working on projects, you know, that are actively like doing stuff, and you know, maybe we can repurpose that Wednesday, or extend that Wednesday meeting to that purpose. That one's also 2 hours. And in that meeting, we don't always end up talking, you know, entirely about the Pico. Gustavo takes us down rabbit holes of how, you know, how the system worked, or questions about documents and stuff like that. Gustavo has a lot of very interesting questions. So that's the thing we could look at. It's like a SIG, right? And I know David, who's left tonight, who was talking about his use of Pascal. David's very interested in programming. David's very interested in programming Pascal. I don't know of anybody else that has programmed in HighSoft Pascal in the 2068 other than David. And he's written articles about it in the newsletters in the past, like Sir Clive Alive he wrote a couple articles for that about HighSoft Pascal. I mean, that may be a thing, a different SIG, if you will.
If we can make it easier with
yes.
the to do it, I would like to try it because my first, in the college, the primary language is Pascal, so I'm familiar with it. I've done it on the QL. But the HighSoft with the 2068, putting the tape in, putting the tape out, it's a little more than just, running Turbo Pascal. But
well, and with Fuse or Zsorix, it'd be a little easier to use. I think maybe the
or the TS Pico. Hello.
Yeah, or with the Pico, it might be possible. I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ryan, too many war stories taking up the time.
What do you mean by that, Ryan?
But actually, the Pascal was replacing for Python. The latest high-level programming is Python, one of the most popular, actually.
Yeah, but Tim was talking about, college in the 80s, am I guessing?
Late 80s, yep.
Yep. Yeah, Pascal was very popular back then.
It was the official language at Cal State Hayward. You had to take it, you had to learn, you had to use it for all your projects.
Yeah.
I'd like to give Ryan a moment.
Yeah,
So
Ryan,
what do you
talk
mean?
to us.
Well, I don't want to offend anybody.
Well, go ahead.
Flame war.
The Timex Sinclair wars.
No, war story, just stuff you did back in the day, the battle you won.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that part of what this is to tell those, right? I just think that without a lot of structure, then I don't know, it's everything that will trigger these and we go off on the tangents. And we don't have a structured way of telling those stories at the right times, I think. And some of it's because, you're trying to recall it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, like the stuff you mentioned earlier, I mean, it sounded like, yeah, we should just have those people here. And maybe that's all just what we were talking about earlier when Adam was talking about the podcast, was just that, maybe that's served by just extending what we're doing here, right?
Okay.
Interviewing just more people. But that could include maybe not interview style perhaps, but certainly it gets captured over time with the many episodes of the members themselves, right? Rather than external guests, as far as like, what the members themselves have done that they might want to talk about in addition to those guests. And I think that one might cover, maybe the gamut of the Timex universe, or at least what's left.
The other thing to kind of add to that is I know, in my work, I work for HP, and I know we started using, at least on some of our meetings, I can't remember what the AI is, but it's they run it through an AI, right? And it kind of gives a synopsis of the meeting.
Well, that's what David does already.
Yeah, AI
Does he?
companion is running on this. I believe it's running
Okay,
on this
okay.
meeting.
I guess I haven't seen that on these meetings, but or accessed it or however it's used, but at least we may be able to consolidate different topics that we talk about into different meetings, right? So if you wanted to, okay, we talked about X, Y, and Z. Well, I want to know more about why. I can go look at these meetings that the AI has determined that we talked about that particular subject. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe maybe even pull those together into its own video, right? So that you wouldn't have to go search for it per se, but that may be more future works. But I mean, that way at least you can, if it's the topic you're interested in, you would be able to just focus in on that topic through various meetings that we've had. You know what I mean? I think that might be helpful for some future discussions of things or things that people are interested in.
Yeah. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what I heard you say was, with regard to, the folks who were there, on the ground at the time, whether they worked for Timex or whether they worked for, other folks, worked for themselves, whatever. Part of what I would like to do with this is preserve as much of those kinds of stories as possible, those personal memories that folks have. Having Danny on and having Lon and Will and Gary and George. They don't often remember a lot during that first kind of interaction, but then we pull some stuff out of them. But then the other part that and I keep asking you, and I keep leaning on you and Carl in particular, because both of you did a bunch of interesting stuff, and like Ryan, you're still puttering with your character generator and some of your other your character editor and some of your other programs, and to me that's fascinating that we did stuff then, we're still doing stuff now, and it sometimes takes a little bit of reflection to get to recall some of those details. Like Carl, you didn't remember a whole raft of stuff about what you did as a kid, until we looked at some of those documents, and you didn't even mention John
Right.
until we had seen those documents, and then we sorted that out. And so the it's as much preservation of community history. That's where I'm working from, in terms of the site, the website and stuff like that. But I feel like it would be good to have a little more structure.
I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Try,
I just
try
don't know how
have
to
an
put that in
agenda.
place. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Being on a board of a couple nonprofits, having an agenda is probably a good thing. Just send it out a couple of days before the meeting.
Okay.
Ask people if they want to add things to it, and then kind of stick to it.
Okay.
That sort of happened this time, but like there wasn't quite enough time to add. Like you sent it out what, day before yesterday? When did you send out the
I've been
notice
so
of this
crazy.
meeting?
Yes.
Well, I'm not
Yeah,
picking
a
on
couple
you
days
there.
ago.
I'm
Day
just
ago.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of time there, but I agree with Tim that it could work like that.
Okay.
I think. I mean, it sounds like it should.
Well, so is everybody here? There's still 17 of us in this meeting tonight. Is everybody here on the groups.io list? Because I don't know for sure, and maybe if you're not on the groups.io list, say that in the chat, and then we'll get you hooked up. Because there's us, sort of the hardcore folks, right?
And you
then
should
there
mention what
are-
exactly groups.io you're talking about. TS 2068.
Yeah, that the list that
Well, basically
David-
took over from Yahoo.
Yep. Migrated us from Yahoo, and before that it was Lewis in his email list. Because in addition to us on the groups.io list, there's roughly 200 folks who have, you go to my website and there's that little pop-up, and who filled that out and said, yeah, they want to know about these meetings. And I think, some of those folks do show up. But I'll include, Tim, I think to your point, I will include an agenda in that announcement that goes out, and just say, this is what we're thinking about.
Adam can be our timekeeper.
Oh
Adam
my
can be our-
goodness.
yeah.
I don't even know what that means. I don't have a watch. I can't use
I'd
a
like
phone
to
for
make a
time.
nomination.
I'm sorry.
Adam should
What's that?
have an official title, Sergeant of Arms.
Oh,
Sergeant
goodness.
of Arms. Adam,
I've
you're
got
gonna have
two
to
so
study
far.
up on Robert's Rules of Order now.
Yep.
And
Perfect
every last
title.
one of you is
Perfect
gonna have
title.
to start, raising your hand. We'll have to pass the conch before you can speak.
Actually, you bring up a point. Is there a way in these Zoom meetings to do things like that?
Well, Mark just raised his hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
you got a hand raised.
Well, I know you can raise it, but is there a way that no one else can really speak until you give them permission? Or
I can silence you all, yes.
yeah, I know you can silence us after we start talking. That I'm aware of. But can everyone be silenced during a presentation, for instance, and then?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, there's ways to do that.
The host can silence everyone individually if they want.
Yeah.
I host a meeting for a local historical group, and I do that. Especially if someone you hear someone in the background chatting, boom, silence. They're
Yeah. If there's noisy backgrounds, I try to turn those off. Hey, Mark, you have your hand up.
I was just writing in the chat, but what about also, we're trying to do the print thing this year, but also maybe a few of us try to meet up at one of the retro, one of the guys on the groups.io, he keeps talking about going to all these retro groups, and we probably have no representation of Timex Sinclair stuff out there.
So, are you
there was. Did
was it?
The floppy disk guy took his 2068 to a show recently.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And I know
where it got killed.
Where it got killed. And I know one other person who doesn't come to our meetings, but has attended VCF shows in the past.
Yeah, VCF, that's what I was thinking of exactly.
Unfortunately, we're pretty far scattered apart. You've got 3-4 folks, in the Albuquerque area, and you guys can get together. Ingo came to Buffalo. What, 2 weeks ago, Ingo?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, and we actually got together, and the next day I was like, shit, we should have taken a picture.
No, my brother wanted us to take a picture, and I was having so much fun, I forgot.
Right. And like y'all, we went and hung out at a brew pub, and had some good food, and good laughs. But Ingo, you're what? It's about 5 or so hours from
4 and a half hour drive. Yeah, it's a little bit of a haul.
Where are you out of?
I'm in the Capital District, so near Albany, New York.
Okay.
So more east.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you in New York too, Mark?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay.
I'm in Brewster all the time. If you know Brewster, my kid plays hockey real close to there. So
does that put us 3 or 4 hours apart too?
no, not even. I'm probably
less.
Hour and a half from Albany.
Okay.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, we should hook up.
Hey, around here, that's called a commute.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. No doubt.
Well, here's the thing. The commuting to New York City, which is 35 miles from my house, is 2.5 hours.
Oh, dear God.
If I drove a car, my last job, my commute would be an hour and a half coming home.
Oh my
And that's
God.
23 miles.
Yeah, yeah. So that's my world too.
Tim, where are you?
I'm in Bay Area,
Where?
Union City.
Okay, because I'm in Livermore right now. I'm at a hotel in Livermore.
I know I used to work out there. I know well. In fact, I spent all of the December in Dublin, 4 days a
Oh,
week.
did you?
for
Yeah, that's that right where the 580 and the 680 cross.
Actually, a little further east from that was where the courthouse is, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean Dublin in general, right? It's kind of like
Yep.
right at that 580, 680 intersection.
When I worked for Legato, it was right at that intersection. Right outside a building was one of the off ramps to go from 580 to 680 northbound. So, yep.
Okay.
We're gonna have
Yeah.
to wear little beepers that if we get next to each other within 20 miles or something, it'll go off and we can meet
Well,
up.
And
Yeah, we should.
so Ryan asked, what about when the agenda is discussion rather than a presentation? How do we limit the time? And actually, I think Andy Wilhelm in the chat has the right answer. We all buy Timex watches.
Casio.
What's it? And we set them, no, Timex. And we use those to limit discussion.
It's also not a bad idea to for every item on the agenda just set a time limit. Okay, we're going to talk about X item. We're going to go 10 minutes on this.
Yeah.
You estimate and try and meet that.
Okay.
So that's always a possibility.
Well, probably what I was thinking there was like, yeah, you could say, well, okay, we're going to have whatever three items or whatever we and some estimate of time. I guess maybe keeping track of the topics. And so if it goes long, it's like, well, okay, there's more to this. Maybe that stays on the list of stuff to go back to. Of course, that gets into kind of something I had thought about too, which was somewhere trying to keep track of the things going on, because after a while on the groups list, it gets a little hard to keep track of what the state of everything that's going on is. I don't know if anybody has any ideas for that.
Actually, since David upgraded us on the groups, we have polls, we have subgroups, and a wiki, and I don't know what we'd use a database for, but there's some tools that we could potentially use.
Did you say a wiki?
Yeah, there's a wiki option in the.
That's always a possibility of creating. It's been a while since I've done a wiki, but we could basically update stats there, keep an agenda there, have individual pages for individual projects there. Each project its own page. That we have one central location for,
Is
doing
that something like if I had a project, if someone had a personal project, could they personally keep that up to date, or is that an admin?
I don't know how the wiki goes with the io.groups, but it also fails to have at least one person volunteer to take updates from different people and update the wiki. If we have a limited amount of people who can update the wiki. So maybe David could look into that.
It looks like we might need to get David Ellis to look into something, because it just says that there's no pages yet, and I don't see an option for creating a wiki page. Let's see if I can create a poll. Oh, I can create a poll. Okay, so if I can create a poll, anybody can.
At the very least, I would volunteer to keep track of things on like a single document. Everyone updates. I keep a document. I can send it out, make it available somewhere if we need to do something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can now upload files. So, I mean, at the very least, Ryan, we could upload files for personal projects and stuff. And maybe one of those files would be a text file.
Yeah,
I like the idea of the wiki though, because that should be easy to use.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if it's possible for the admin to create wiki pages for individuals, say that individual is then allowed to modify. If if that's a possibility, then I think that would be great, because then everybody who has their thing can just go in and update it as
Their own page, right?
as they need to, but not not everybody else's page, just their own.
Yeah.
That would be possible.
Yes, right.
One thing we can do in these meetings also is action items.
Okay.
Tasks get defined, and we okay, we come back next meeting, who's got an action item, and we go through them also, or
Yeah.
work on them on the mailing list.
Cool. We're at 10:30-ish, and I want to talk about my own personal hope is for a physical ZX zine in 2024. I'm not the only one. Marcus suggested this as well.
Yeah, how cool would that be to get that in the mail?
So what would this have?
Well, this would require commitment by us to do something.
Almost like what we're working on, the stuff we're talking about right now, right? But imagine like just a physical thing with pictures and
So if you go back and look at the old newsletters that user groups had, it was all contributed from the members.
Yeah.
Basically, person, hey, I'm working this. I've got this project. I wrote a software I wrote. I want to talk about this. Sometimes they have recurring articles.
Yeah.
So that's always a possibility. The doing the digital side is easy.
Yeah.
It's going to be the printing it and mailing it and the costs associated with that. How much of a run do we do? Do we do stapled? Do we do 11 by 17 folded? How much color? And then the cost of mailing and how we mail it with inside envelopes. So that's always something to look at. We could use.
Why not just make it electronic?
Well, but
why not just make it electronic so that
Tim
everyone
currently
can
does
access
that.
it online?
Yeah, we already have that.
Yeah. So Tim does that with his ZX zine. He's been doing that for how many years now, Tim?
5 or 6 or more. But I haven't done an issue in like a year.
Yeah.
But I do want to say, since I'm sort of the unofficial treasurer, we have $2,376 in our account from the Bill Miller collection to go to anyone who wants to use the projects. We could use this to help offset some of the costs of printing. Everyone chips in like, X dollars per, let's say it costs $4 to print. And then we could say, okay, everyone chip in $2 and the fund picks up $2 or something like that. Or we all chip in the cost of printing and the fund covers the cost of mailing. So there's always that possibility how we want to use this money.
And Greg, you said, a few minutes back in the chat that that you wanted to see modern hardware, like I know about that chroma color thing that you're talking about, but I've not actually seen one in person.
I haven't either. That's why I wanted to see one.
Yeah,
and I was going to right?
And I was going to bring that up as well, because I didn't want to get that to get lost, because I know I asked the guy that builds those chromas, when he's going to do another run of ZX81 ones, right?
Yeah.
And because he actually emailed me about the ZX81, he says he's getting ready to start making those, and just to give me a heads up that, hey, it's coming pretty soon. And I'm like, well, I really don't have a ZX80, but this might actually kind of maybe convince me to build one. I certainly can't buy one because they're, $300, $400, $500 if you find one.
Yeah.
But there you can, get a board, and I think you can just make one, right? But and he also has one for the Spectrum. But yeah, I mean, there's some modern hardware I think that's out there that a lot of us probably don't even realize that's out there. The Chroma one is kind of cool because it gives color and sound to the ZX81, right? And he's actually has a library of software he's converted to color that are ZX81 games, mainly like Monster Maze, 3D Monster Maze. He made a color version of that, right? So it's kind of cool. A lot of us don't know that. And I mean, a lot of us probably aren't interested in that, but I mean, 3D Monster Maze for me with the ZX81 was the holy grail, right? I mean, that was back before PC games came out that had that kind of I think I actually remember being scared, getting scared from that. The damn three T-Rex is right next to you, and you physically kind of you get a reaction. I mean, how cool is that on a video
That was
game?
a heck
It
of a
was
step up from
Doom
Zor.
before Doom.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right,
I
that's
mean, you
right.
had right, and it because this was probably 82-ish, and I mean calling it 3D is a stretch, but still, it was in a 3D
It
environment,
was.
but anyway,
we have, some of us have stuff. There's at least a few Next owners on the list, and one of them could maybe write a review of their Next and tell us what that is like for them.
what's his name was on our calls a couple times. He just got a
Alan?
Next. No, what's gosh,
TJ?
TJ, I think it's TJ.
Yeah.
Sinclair Society.
Yeah.
He's the crazy guy that's always he just talks and yaks and talks and I think it's TJ. Yeah, I think that's his name. Yeah,
That could be me. We don't know.
Well, not like TJ. I mean,
you don't have a beard like TJ.
Yeah. I mean, he was pretty quiet on our meetings, but go watch some of his videos. He's really, really animated.
Yeah.
He has limited internet access. He has speed issues, so that's probably why he doesn't join our meetings.
Yeah.
But he does do his videos, and it takes him a long time to upload them. He's actually only about 3 hours away. He's been by here once before, where I gave him a bunch of my old stuff. But it's still, it's about 3 hours. He doesn't get down here very often, but we have met once before, some years ago.
But I know I hadn't watched his yet, but I did see that he got a Next, a KS2 Next. And he did a video on it.
Yeah.
But I just know, and I posted that up on the forums too, that or the groups IO, that I'm starting to see a lot of people doing videos about their Kickstarter 2 versions. So they're obviously getting them.
I think some of the guys that chat with in UK are getting them too. There's a whole Sinclair QL forum chat that has a bunch of folks are on. They do more than QL chat, and there's a few folks in the US that have joined it that do. One guy's got a one per desk that he's talking about. A couple guys locally are on there. So, and it's very retro oriented versus just plain QL.
What do you mean by that? That he has one per desk?
Pardon?
Oh, it's a specific product.
The one per desk was it's also known as the Merlin Tonto. It's a specially designed QL. Imagine a QL hooked up with a phone. That was the idea.
Impossible.
Impossible. Go look up OPD, one per desk, or on the Merlin Tonto. So,
yeah,
okay,
they do crazy things like that.
Working on something. Talk.
So that's actually an interesting thought. Like maybe the groups we could do. The problem is there's a whole range of issues, right? A whole range of products. Maybe we have like one group just for one meeting just for QL. And that's, that's your sweet spot, Tim, right? So
I cover, so my sweet spot right now is ZX81 and QL. I do a little bit of 2068, but so I like all three, but the time I spent the most in is QL. But again, I like all three. That's why I do the ZX Zine and SMSQ Zine.
Right.
So
you have two different zines?
Yes. One for QL, the ZX one covers anything, the ZX81, the 1000, the 2068, the Spectrum. Whereas the SMSQ zine covers just the QL.
By the way, I didn't know you had the other zine, by the way. I knew you had the QL one.
Maybe you can post links to those again tomorrow or tonight or something.
Yeah.
Just go to my website. It's basically whatever link you've seen that I've posted before, just delete and just go to the main. It's swensont@epizzy.com, I think, something like that.
Well, for the benefit of people who are not here,
I'll send it out.
Yeah,
but I post everything there. That I write. Not a lot of stuff I write, and so in fact, I just added recently the Timex computer history thing, so that's there.
By the way, that was great.
Yeah, as I said, all Timex roads leads to David. So that's what I found. Every time I do a search, there we go. I'm going to say, so his site load probably went up while I was doing research. Damn, it's
That's
him again.
likewise.
And the other thing too, I
Yeah.
wanted to kind of throw out before we get too close to the end here is, me and Ryan, it's kind of a brainchild of mine, but Ryan's kind of, I think, doing more coding on it because I just don't have the bandwidth for that. But is converting more Sinclair Spectrum programs into 2068 versions, right? And I know I've kind of not really talked to Tim, but Tim has some of this stuff on one of the zines where he talks, about converting the Sinclair Spectrum stuff to run on the 2068. But my brainchild is kind of to do it more in an automated fashion. We've got much more powerful tools now that can look at the code and automatically change it and make a version that would hopefully run on the 2068. We still have to kind of vet it, but as we vet it and we put that intelligence into the tool, I think we can make it fairly trivial to convert even machine language programs that were meant for the Spectrum to run on the 2068 natively, and kind of realize that idea I think that Timex had of maybe they obviously started that with some of the games and things that they
Carl,
have.
I'm going to ask Gustavo to jump in here for that, because on Wednesday we were talking about, we got sidetracked, if you can believe it, during that TS Pico
Well,
meeting.
of course.
Yeah, and we started chatting about how you'd use a joystick, like that was for games, that was for the Spectrum, on maybe with the Pico or some other way with the Timex. And Gustavo, are you still there? I'm not even.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Hi. You were chatting, and you mentioned how the joystick is done and it would take too many bytes to convert easily from the Spectrum to the 2068. Did I get that right? I mean, it was only a few days ago, but
Yes, that's could be possible if you have a connector, a joystick connector in a specific board, and then map these pins for this joystick to different I/O as a standard joystick. For example, you read the same data in different ports. That is the way. You can read the data in the keyboard address, just simulate the keyboard mode, or Kempston, or another I don't know, compatibility, depend of the model. If you are Kempston, you are cursor keys or whatever. Depend. For the Pico, could not with the actual hardware, right? But with the Pico, if you create the joystick port as an expansion board on one of the 4 slots that we have, we can create a very, very robust joystick board. Would support all the protocols. That is the idea.
well, I understand that. I guess what I was trying to get at for what Carl's talking about is there's no direct, easy path to convert a lot of the stuff from the Spectrum to the 2068 without like having to go in there manually by hand.
No, you mentioned that the TS Pico platform. Ah, okay. No, the impossibility is because you need 24K of the ROM to support that, and you cannot map 24K on the Spectrum directly. You have 16 in the home ROM, and you don't have an extension ROM. You need to create the ROM switching as the 2068 has. That is the reason to get the compatibility with the ROM.
Well, and
yeah,
and in relation to that, I mean, and Ryan can jump in too, but my idea is eventually, you got to start at the lowest, low hanging fruit, right? So let's look at a game that Timex has already converted, say Ant Attack, right? Ant Attack came out, I think Quicksilver made it in the UK. It was a Spectrum game, but Timex obviously converted it. Might have been one of their first, because we had a guest on from Timex that talked about playing Ant Attack on the 2068 in the early days. Right, I thought that might have been one of the first games that they might have actually converted, right, to run using all the 2068 ROM calls instead of the Spectrum ROM calls. Anyway, I don't know about joystick capability there, but me and Ryan have talked about that, and that is kind of like another couple tiers down the road where the program can look and see a Spectrum game has joystick compatibility already built in, for instance, right? Probably it's going to be using a Kempston interface, which is on port 31, I think. So the program may be able to get to a point where it can see, oh, well, I'm talking to port 31. Well, why would you talk to port 31? That's the joystick port for Kempston, right? That's kind of the logic there, the intelligence there. Now it goes and sees what's the machine code involved in that. It could be real simple machine code, or it could be maybe a little bit more complex of what it's doing with reading the joystick, right? But if it's simple, then we could just change the port to use the Timex port, right? And we could convert the, I don't know how it uses 5 bits just like the Timex does, up, left, down, right, and fire, right? I mean, there's the 5 bits. What?
But the problem,
I think the problem is that Gustavo is saying is that reading the Timex joystick is more than just a single in.
Exactly. You need the indirect addressable because you need to set up the register 14 on the program sound generator chip, and then get the data. You cannot solve in a single input-output cycle.
I understand. Okay, I see what you're saying. So in relation to that, the machine code that this program would create would have to take that into account.
Right.
Now that may, you only have so many bytes that the previous code existed in. So, maybe it's going to make that bigger. And so we'll have to figure that out. But the gist of it is to start from a low hanging fruit standpoint is to convert software automatically with this program to run on the 2068, even with machine code ROM calls.
Yes.
You see, so that way you could, I've got a tap file of this Spectrum game. Throw it into this program. It looks at it, evaluates it, creates a diff list, basically, right? So you can fact check it yourself if you wanted to. If it doesn't work, well, why doesn't it work? We've got a thing of everything that changed, so we know where to look. And it's just a baby thing right now, but that's kind of my goal and envision is to be able to just throw programs into this program, and it would convert it and spit out a 2068 version, right? And as that gets better and better, then we can start adding things to it, like the joystick, or maybe changing, this is kind of way down the road, but changing the beeps into actually using the AY chip to create those tones instead of just beeping.
So, Carl, we have about 10 minutes left. I was hoping, this is a pretty cool topic. Since we haven't really decided what's happening at the next meeting, would you like to talk about that for half an hour at the next meeting? What do you think of that, David?
Yeah,
just to get us something started.
And I was going to say to Carl that what you are talking about sounds like an article for Tim's magazine.
Right.
Sounds like the perfect.
I mean, Tim's thing is kind of, obviously going way back to John Brown's, his manual decipheration, his manual decoding of the Spectrum ROM calls to the 2068 ROM calls. See, this goes way kind of back for me, because that's kind of what we were thinking of doing back then, but it would have been a much more manual process, right? We'd have to get the program, throw it into a disassembler, go through it, code, line by line, figure out where the ROM calls are. But today, with the tools that we have today, we can just make the software do that.
Yeah,
it'd be like a transpiler, basally.
Right. We're converting.
But it would be a good subject for for an article for I mean, you don't have to describe the entire. You don't have to.
It's more easy to attach a Kempston interface to the Timex. That's it. You don't need to modify nothing.
No. That was what I was going to say, is that once we have a little thing that we can plug in these nice little simple cards into some slots, and you just have a little guy. It's all it is. It just has a Kempston port on it.
You could get a device like that. Okay. So
I'm just gonna move to England and get a Spectrum.
F that shit.
Well, I just wanted to throw that out there because I'm sure that would generate some interest. Because, like I said, I know that's obviously was going to be Timex's big plan. You've got this huge software base. The more that you convert to run on your machine, the more popular your machine just became.
Yeah.
So what's a low hanging fruit?
Low hanging fruit is basically easy stuff to convert. You know, maybe it doesn't use joystick ports. Maybe it's all basic, right? But I would think that would work either way. You know, I don't think there's, you know, anything unique about the 2068 going from Spectrum to 2068. Obviously, there is going from 2068 to Spectrum because there are those special commands that the 2068 brought. But it's just easier machine language programs that don't really do stuff in a weird way, right? They just use the standard ROM calls. And that's why I was kind of mentioning to Ryan is let's look at stuff that Timex already did, right?
So-
because we have a Spectrum version, right? We already have a Spectrum version. We have the version that Timex made, and we can see what Timex changed. If that's
So I
easy for
was-
us to do.
So I was doing that, and I ran into a couple problems.
There's a bunch of problems.
One was I couldn't find that Antitak was converted. But I might have not been looking right. And the crazy bugs, this is weird. Crazy bugs, it says, oh, okay, I know that one. Yep, and I got a Timex version and what's labeled as a Spectrum version. And the Spectrum version runs just fine. So I don't know.
Oh, how weird. Maybe
Well,
they selected it because it didn't require any conversion.
Right. And the other thing too, just to throw this out there, is to actually maybe at some point have this program make a doc file, make a cartridge file, so that you could actually put these games onto a solid state cartridge and run them that way. Because that would be the more modern thing to do. I don't really want to make cassette games today, right? Sure, we can make a tap file, but another ultimate goal of this is to convert it into a cartridge game, right? That way you can just load it up and have it run immediately. But anyway, that's, you know, there's multiple tiers to this, but obviously, yeah, that I just wanted to throw it out there and get some.
So Carl and Ryan, if you want to talk about it, if you're willing to talk about this at the next meeting, you have until the 21st. So it's actually 3 weeks because of the way that, you know, the month started on a Monday. And that's our next meeting is January 21st, 2 p.m. on a Sunday. You guys want to pay attention to the chat. Does that sound like a reasonable agenda thing for y'all, Carl and Ryan?
I would certainly like to talk about it because I think I think it has some broad application, right? I mean, obviously, it's not something that's really niche. I think this is something that we could, you know, everybody could benefit from.
Yeah, and like Tim said, we'll put a time limit on this. We'll say we're going to cap it at 30.
And also, will we just silence everyone? If they have a question, they can type it in the chat? Is that how it works? Okay.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past, and see, but yeah, and then Mark, bring your ideas to, you know, to the discussion. Does anybody have future agenda items? Thank you very much, Andy. So we have any future agenda items, not necessarily for the 21st, but, you know, ad infinitum.
So I got one quick thing with all the discussion about repairing 2068s. I know in the QL world there are people that have documented the different boards and what changes are. Has anybody done that with the 2068 as far as revisions of boards that are out there?
So real quick, I know that there are, if you open up your 2068 and there's a number on the lower right hand corner, it will either be 3A or 3D. I couldn't tell you what the difference is between those two yet.
Okay. I was just curious if someone's actually documenting. I know people have in the Spectrum world and the ZX81 world, but I'm not sure about the 2068 world.
Correct.
That's a good point, because I know, you know, like I said, I've been repairing a bunch of these. I still am right now, but I know even on the A boards, David, that you know, down by where the sound chip is, I know I've seen boards where they've actually physically cut the trace there. Right, because I think it provided plus 5 volts to the memory.
Yep.
But they've physically cut it, and they've run a wire to there.
I've seen that as well. Yes. I know
And
you're
then I've
talking
also
about.
seen A boards where that cut is already in the mask. It's already, they didn't have to physically cut it. It was already
Yeah.
there, but it's
Okay.
still an A board.
Oh, okay.
You know,
Well,
so
maybe-
it's weird.
Maybe Dr. Carl can start documenting this.
Yeah, that might be. I maybe need to take some pictures of these boards while I
Yeah.
got them because
Yeah.
you know. But anyway, and that's the other thing
Yeah.
I just kind of want to throw out there is that Z80 thing I was talking right at the beginning of the meeting, is I got that, you know, one of Ryan's boards, the Z80 was bad, right?
That's interesting.
That's what was preventing it
That
from
was the
booting up
issue.
at all. Okay, so I got the Z80 out of the 1000 that I'm working on to make the silver 1500. Anyway, that's another thing.
Yep.
So I put that I put that Z80 in his 2068 and it booted. Oh, okay. So I put that Spectrum diagnostic cartridge on there, right? Well, it would start going through the memory check and it would get to the random memory chip on the upper 32K and it would crash. What the hell's that with? Oh, there's also an NMI button on the cartridge. When you hit that, it usually takes you to the keyboard test right away. You hit the NMI button, keyboard test come up. On that machine, I hit the NMI button, I'd get a RAM failure screen that would come up. What the hell's going on there? So I bought some Z80s, new ones, or new old stock from 83. I just threw one of those in. I just got those the other day. I threw it in there and now it passes all the tests and the NMI works just like it's supposed to. So I don't know what that Z80's problem is. It's an NEC Z80, right? It's from NEC.
780. Yeah.
Right. It's a 780C or whatever. But something's wrong with it because it fails that random check. And I mean, the machine boots up, you turn it on, you don't have the cartridge on there, you come up to the Timex copyright screen. But what problem would it manifest down the road?
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Because it looks like it works. And I would have probably said, okay, it's good. But the diagnostic tests would fail on it. So I don't know what exactly. Anyway, it's just kind of an interesting failure case for something like that.
One last thing. Greg Bennett wants us to know that the Z-Expand Plus is again available on Sell My Retro. He put a link in the chat. I'm not even going to bother putting the link in the YouTube notes because by the time that I get this put up on YouTube, it will have sold out. As a matter of fact, if you want a Z-Expand, you have to buy it like right this minute. That's how fast they sell out.
Yeah,
they just do.
Just gives you color and extra RAM on the ZX81?
No, the Z-Expand is
Wi-Fi connection.
It gives you a 32K. It gives a joystick port. Gives you an audio chip, the AY audio chip, and
SD card.
it has a serial connection, which I don't know if anyone actually uses, but
I'll use it then. I'll have to get one.
and the SD card.
yeah, and of course the SD card.
Software on solid state.
Oh, and it's modified for WRX graphics, so you can
That's
get the
right.
High res.
without any modification.
It's a wonderful piece of equipment if you have an 81 or a 1000. On that note, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been action packed.
Hey Dave, you forgot the announcement
for next week.
No, for
the next meeting.
Yeah, the New York State, ZX.
Oh, the New York State ZX81 user group meeting. Yeah, all three of us will be meeting somewhere, sometime.
I'll fly out there. I'll be part of the Albuquerque one and the New York one.
All right. Yeah,
it's going to be like that.
You're always welcome, Adam. You're always welcome.
It's going to be like that. What was it? The band? That Simple Minds song. Somewhere, sometime in the summertime.
Oh, somewhere, yeah, summertime.
We're going back to the beginning of the meeting with the new wave music.
That's exactly right. Yep.
That's a great way to end.
Bookending it. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks guys for everybody that's sending me stuff or it's helped. I just want to say I appreciate it. I definitely appreciate it.